Hey, so welcome back to my channel. I am Jason, and this is from Sinn's Perspective Reviews. I am going to be recapping the first season of Dracula. It's going to be a lot, okay? So I'm going to try to make these recaps as short as possible, but given that there's only 3 episodes and each episode is an hour and a half, I'm going to do the best that I can. So this is going to be a recap of Dracula Episode 1, Season 1, Episode 1, The Rules of the Beast. Okay, so it's not 1864 Hungary. So it opens up at this convent. And so you see this guy, Mr. Harker, he's in the room, and he's looking pretty bad. He looks emaciated, he's pale, he's bald, he's battered and bruised, he just looks terrible. He's stiff, he can barely move. And Sister Agatha arrived. And she's there to kind of fill in the blanks. So Mr. Harker had given a written account of his time with Dracula, and so she's there now. He's trying to figure. He's like, well, I wrote everything down, and she's like, yeah, but I'm here basically to find out what you didn't put in, like the personal, the more intimate moments, the dinners, the conversations, that kind of stuff. So that's what she's interested in. Okay, so they sit down. Another sister walks in because Sister Agatha said, I guess I can't be trusted. And so to keep everything above board, we need a chaperone. So the other sister comes in, doesn't give her name. She's just there to observe and see what's going on and listen and hear what's going on. And so the question she posed to Mr. Harker is, why are you still alive? And he goes into how Dracula is evil, he's the devil, he barely escaped with his life. And so Sister Agatha asked him, so why aren't you still fleeing? He was like, what do you mean? He said, well, you stopped here at the convent. He said, well, I feel safe here. And she was like, oh, okay, you feel safe here. He said, this is the place of God. And so Sister Agatha was like, oh, okay, it feels, really it's a place of God, huh? He said, well, she turns to the sister sitting next to her, like, well, it feels good to have a man about the place, don't you think? And so the sister is like, I think she's just a heretic in this. You can see she's giving her a side out, like, that's completely inappropriate. But, so basically, okay, she wants, it's a lot of notes, I'm sorry, so I'm going to have to look down sometimes for a minute. So Agatha, she did ask him this odd question, like, did you ever have any sexual contact with Dracula? And of course he's like, what are you talking about? Okay, so he sits there and he starts talking, and now we're in Transylvania, and there's this woman who, she hands him this cross, and it's known that evil things go on up there. So she hands him this cross, and of course he kind of brushes it off, like, oh, I'm just there. I'm just going to be there for a few. It wasn't. He was none the wiser about it. But the lady was like, just don't lose this. Keep this with you. And so Harker was like, okay, so how am I going to get? This is kind of far from the castle. And so they said he'll send his driver to pick you up. And then the guy, Harker was like, well, how's he gonna know where I am? Basically, like, he always knows. So you just wait here. They'll come. His driver will come and get you. So the driver eventually comes to get him, and he's there on his way to the castle, and he's reflecting on the letter that Mina sent him, his fiance, who's back in England. And it brings a smile to his face. She kind of jokes around, like, I understand you're gonna be away for a while, and just improprieties, and it was a funny letter. So he kind of chuckled a little bit. So they get to the castle, and he turns to the driver, who looks creepy as fuck, and was like, okay, so are you gonna help me with my bag? And the driver just was sitting there and just looking at him, like, okay, I guess not. So he walks up to the door, knocks on the door opens, he walks in, he already sees like food and wine all already on the table. And he goes to pour a glass of wine, and that's when you see Dracula, who looks like this old, decrepit man. And, you know, he comes out and he begins to talk, and he explains why he's there. Dracula was interested in purchasing this property. Harker is there to basically finalize the paperwork for the sale of the property, and only supposed to be there for a few days to finalize everything, and he's back on his way on the road back to England because him and Mina are supposed to get married soon. And so they're sitting and talking, and again, Harker is under the impression that he's supposed to leave the next day, the next morning, and Dracula's like, well, no need to apologize because you're not leaving. And of course he's like, what are you talking about? He said, well, the powers that be, meaning Harker's supervisors, agreed that she would stay here for at least a month to help me with my English and to kind of educate me on your culture, because because Dracula wants to go to England. And so Harker was like, what are you talking about? I'm a lawyer, I'm not a teacher. And basically, Dracula was like, well, I don't really need a teacher, I just need you here to absorb you. And so he's like, absorb you, obviously, which is weird. And so of course back at the company, because it's flashing back and forth between telling the story, and of course Agatha is asking him questions from time to time to explain certain things, or to elaborate, or if she felt like there are gaps, she kind of comes in and, you know, asks him like, what do you mean? Well, why didn't you do this? Whatever. Okay, so you hear her say absorb. He used that word absorb, and she was like, yes. And he said absorb. And so they're now walking up this staircase, this crazy staircase that's en route. She's taking them to his room. And so Dracula goes into the story about the castle and the architect and the architect's love, and how he designed it in memory of his love. And he basically was telling him to refrain from wandering about because it is a maze of corridors and rooms. You can get lost. You know, they're allowed lost souls in here. Of course, he's just and he said, you don't have a map of, and Dracula was like, no, there's no map of this place because no one person really knows the layout. So basically, don't wander around. So they get to the room, and he's unpacking, and he's telling him about like the sun coming in and the thick curtains, and, you know, just basically make a conversation. And then he goes to put a mirror on the desk, and this old decrepit man who's hobbling about and can barely make it around, somehow flies across the room and knocks this mirror off the desk, and he didn't think anything of it. I'm like, I'd be like, how the hell did you move that fast? And so he bends down to pick up the mirror, and of course Dracula's like, oh, please forgive me, I'm clumsy, da-da-da. And of course Harker's like, do you have another one? He's like, no, I don't have such things. I think it's basically a waste of time and vanity, da-da-da. He doesn't have mirrors. So of course Harker's picking up the glass, they're still talking. He cuts his finger, and then you see Dracula's fangs. And so he's trying to control himself. And then he said that, please be careful. We don't want to send you back to Mina injured. And of course, bells start going off in the same like, Mina, how did you know about Mina? He said, well, you mentioned her at dinner. And he's like, and he's looking confused, like, no, I didn't. He said, you had wine. He's like, well, I really didn't have that much wine. And he's like, oh, just be careful. He said, oh, it's nothing. It's just blood. And I think Dracula said blood isn't nothing. Blood is lives. And so, of course, Sister Agatha comes and she wants to be certain. Are you sure he didn't say lives instead of lives and plural lives, plural? And so he was like, no, he said lives, plural. Okay, so she's like, well, you didn't think that was odd? He said, well, I did. She said, were there any other odd things that you noticed? And he said, it seemed like he could read my thoughts. I couldn't figure out how he could know my thoughts. And Sister Agatha made some comment about how dogs can sense things and something to that effect. And she was like, I wonder if it was through your blood he's able to sense your see your memories and that kind of thing. And so it's through the blood. And so we flash back to the room, and Dracula's basically leaving for the night and saying that I'm going to be busy during the day, so I'm not going to be here. And he steps out, and, you know, wishes him a good night. And he steps out, and before Harker can make it to the door, he hits the corner, and he's gone like a puff of smoke. So of course Harker's kind of looking around, and he didn't think anything of it. And so he, next thing you know, he closed the door and he hears scratching on the window. And he goes to the window. He didn't see anything right off, but he saw something was scratched into the window, but you couldn't really make out what it was. He opened the window, looked around, and you could see something kind of scurry away on the roof. So now he's like, okay, is somebody else in the castle? And so we're back at the convent, and Sister Agatha was like, maybe it was another guest or maybe another prisoner. And Harker was like, well, at the time, I didn't know I was a prisoner. So he eventually, again, first off, he went to bed, and he started having this dream. She started asking him, like, were you dreaming? What about the dream? Did you dream about? He didn't want to say anything because he was having a sexual dream about Mina. And then she asked him about. Then all of a sudden he saw Dracula. So he's having sex with Mina, and then all of a sudden he sees Dracula. And then he wakes up and he was kind of ashamed, and she was like, and Sister Agatha was like, there's no reason for you to be embarrassed. Dreams are where we can sin without consequences. And then she said, I should know, there are days I can't look Sister Rosa in the eye. So it was like, okay. And of course the other sister sitting there, eyes kind of got big, like, what? Okay, so he goes back to the question where she asks if he's ever had sexual contact with Dracula, and then he was like, well, why did you ask that? And she said, we think that it's some type of contaminant that you may have come in contact with, had some contact with Dracula. And so they're back there. Harker, it's the next morning, so now he sets off to try to figure out who else is in the castle. And so he's kind of searching. Actually, before he leaves the room, when he wakes up, he wakes up and he doesn't look rested. Like, he looks like he had a long night. He's all done. And the blinds are open, and so he can see the message now. It was written in reverse, but on the carpet it says, help us. So now he's out, and he's kind of trying to figure out, okay, who else could be in the castle. So he's walking. He seems like he's been walking forever, from corridor, from one hallway to the next, one room to the next. It's just, like I said, it's a maze. And so now he's lost. And eventually he wakes up at the table, back at the dinner table. And he can hear Dracula talking, but he's kind of dazed, almost like he was drugged. And he could hear Dracula talking, and all of a sudden you could hear Dracula's accent is almost gone. He could almost speaks perfect English, and he actually looks younger. And still, he hasn't really, Harker still hasn't really caught on. And so the next day, he eventually goes to bed. Next day, he is up and he's searching again. And he sees a woman go walking down the corridor, and then she disappears. So eventually they sit down to dinner, and Dracula is looking even younger at this point. And he asked him, is there anybody else in the castle? And of course Dracula said no. He was like, well, the servants aren't here at night. He said, no, but during the day I don't see anyone either. Other than the driver and you, is anybody else alive in the castle? And he said, no, there's nobody else living in the castle. Anybody living, he means actually alive, not at least Dracula, but of course Harker meant something. I'm sorry, I thought I heard somebody at my door. So the next morning, Harker, he looks like he's just, you can see him getting older and older as Dracula is getting younger. And so we go back to the convent, and Agatha made the same observation. So as you were getting older, the opposite was happening with Dracula. And he said, did you notice what was happening to you? And he basically said, I thought I was sick. He continued. So the other nun in the room said that you were very brave. And he said, I don't feel very brave. She said, well, even though you knew that your life was in danger, you could sense your life was in danger, you still were more focused on trying to help somebody else that you thought was there. So I felt that was pretty brave. And so they get back to go back to the castle, And he continued to search, and he gets deeper and deeper in the castle. He finds a basement that contains a bunch of suitcases and crates and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, these corpses start popping out all over the place, grabbing him, chasing him, and he eventually runs down another corridor that runs into this other room that contains Dracula's coffin. So now he sees Dracula. Dracula wakes up. He comes out of the coffin. So he's now kind of wedged in between Dracula coming towards him on one side and the corpse is coming towards him on the other side. And that's basically all he remembers. And of course, Agatha wanted more information, but she was like, "That's basically all I remember." But the thing is, one of the corpses kept saying Amarama, or something like that. And so Sister Agatha that means kill me in Romanian. He was like, well, they look dead enough as it was. What? She was like, no, they were undead. And so now she's explaining to him about how this contagion that renders the sufferers basically everlasting life. You know, they look, even though their skin, they decay, they're unable to die, and they just suffer. Even when they're reduced to dust, they still suffer. And she was like, Dracula is undead, but he's much more. And she's basically trying to find out what is it about him that makes him different. So they're back in the castle, and Harker wakes up in the room, and wakes up in a room. I don't remember where it was, and in the dining room. I think he was in the dining room. And of course, Dracula was like, well, I found you asleep on the floor. And he knows something's up. And at this point, Harker looks an absolute mess. He looks tired, ragged, old. He just looks emaciated. His eyes are sunken. He just looks, every night he's there, he just looks, every day he wakes up, he looks worse and worse. And so now Dracula is, I guess, back to his full glory and his youth, and he just looks very spry and vibrant and alive, right? While, of course, Harker looks a hot-ass mess. And so he picks him up off the floor and plops him in the chair and says, I want you to write 3 letters. And he was like, what, why am I doing that? And so during this time, he could hear a baby crying. And Harker was like, where's the baby? And Dracula was like, there is no baby. And he said, baby, this will help you focus. And so he put a photo of Mina, the photo that Mina had in his room. He put it on the table, and he was like, well, who was that? At this point, he didn't even recognize Mina anymore. And he said, that's your fiance, Mina. And then he reflected back on the dream and all that. And then he knew something was wrong. He's like, how could I not remember her? And so he said, okay, I want you to write 3 letters. One letter is saying that you'll be leaving within the week. The second letter, saying that you'll be leaving, you've completed your work, and that you'll be leaving the next day. And the third letter is going to say that you've left and that you've gone to someplace, I forget, that you've gone to someplace. And so Harker says, why? And he said, what do you mean? He said, why am I writing these letters? If something happens to me and these letters go out, then nobody will ever know. And so Dracula was like, no one will know that you were here. And then he says, do you want Mina to come here looking for you? Like, he said, real creepy. And so Harker was like, okay. He's collecting the dots, and he said, okay, with the date. So Harker, he's still saying, where's the baby? He can still hear the baby crying. And of course, Dracula's like, there's no baby. And so he said, what's the dates? And then Dracula was like, dates? Well, how do I date the letters? And so he said the 12th, the 19th, and the 29th. And so he realized that the 29th would most likely be the day that he was killed. So now he's like, okay, I have a time frame to get up out of here, and he still hears this baby. And so he jumps up and says, I can leave now. He said, you could, but I'm pretty sure that you won't make it very far, because at this point he's weak. He can barely move. And he still hears his baby. And so Dracula picks up this, looks like a basket, but it's covered, and you can hear the baby crying. And he said, just leave the baby. And Dracula was like, there is no baby. So he walks off. Dracula walks on up the stairs with the baby. And so they're back at the Covenant. Agatha was asking questions, and he said that the dates gave me a time frame. So I knew that kind of the time frame I had to work with. in order to kill Dracula. And so of course Sister Agatha was like, okay, well, how are you going to do that? You were weak and enfeebled. And he said, yeah, but that was to my advantage. He's like, how so? Because he would never expect me to do anything because I'm weak and feeble. And she said, yeah, but you're still weak, but you were still weak and feeble. He said, yeah, but I had a possible ally. So he's still thinking that there's somebody else in the castle that could help him. And so, but he says, I need to find out where these maps are. He believed that these maps existed. And so he started connecting the dots. He said Dracula inadvertently told me where I could look. And so, what he reflected back on was the story of the architect and the architect's love and why he built the castle. And so there were photos of the architect and his love hanging on various different walls in the castle. And so he realized that, so he got the picture, the photo of the lover, and he went into, and actually the architect had hid the plans and all of that behind her photo. So he got that. And then he went to the architect's photo and realized that behind that was a secret room. And so he went into the room, and that's when he saw, it was like 3 crates, and then he saw like dead rats. Some had live rats, there were some dead rats. This is how Dracula was feeding these whatever this was in the crate. And so that, you know, this woman pops up looking haggard and looking a hot ass mess as usual, like everybody else in there except Dracula. And he said, "What that was you that I saw that said help us." And so she was like, "Yeah, I guess you're his new friend." And he was like, "We're not friends." She said, "You're she says that I'm one of his friends too." And they start having this weird conversation. And then he walks around and he realizes that he had actually fed the baby to her. She killed the baby and drank the baby's blood. And so the next thing she jumps out of the box, and he realized, he said, "You killed the baby." And so they start going back and forth. She bit him. And so he tried to use that cross. At this point, he had grabbed the cross that the woman had gave him earlier before he got that hit around his neck. And he's trying to hold his cross up. It didn't do anything. But so she ends up biting him. He passes out. And so they're back at the Covenant. She's asking a question. Okay, so Harker questioned Agatha's faith. Like, she really doesn't seem like she's a believer anymore, and her response was, it's like a woman trapped in a loveless marriage, but keep up appearances to maintain the roof over her head. That was basically how she saw herself at that point. Like, something had happened, like her face had gone, like she really just wasn't, she was really just going through the motions. And so he woke up in the box, and as you know, this baby is crying or whatever, and then you see the baby, and the baby's been turned. And so Dracula comes out, he pulls him out of the box, throws him to the floor, and next thing you know, he sees the woman who bit him. He sees her dead on the floor with a stake in her heart. And Dracula was like, why did you kill her? And Dracula was like, well, I only keep 3 brides at a time. He's like, brides? And so Dracula puts on his little cape, his little couture thing, and he picks up Harker, because Harker, you can see, he's on his left leg. And he carries him up, and he's talking to him, and he lays him on. He goes to the top of the castle, to one of the terraces, and he lays him down in the sun, as far out as he can, because he can't walk in the sun. And now he's talking to him, asking him to describe the sun to him. And basically Harker said no. And he said, well, I understand why, because I'm going to kill you. So I guess, it makes sense that you wouldn't want to do anything to help me. So back in the Covenant, Agatha she said, we're still waiting for an explanation on how you got out of the castle, because it's still unclear, like, how did he get away? And he said, well, it's in my written account. And so this is when they finally show him what his written account. And his written account was basically page after page after page of him saying that Dracula is Lord, and Dracula is our Savior, and Dracula is God, and Dracula. He was like, wait a minute, what is this? Like, he didn't recognize the writing. He thought that he was actually writing what had happened, but these words that were coming from him, he did not recognize. And so now he's confused, like, what the hell? So now we're back on the roof, And Dracula, he was asking Dracula to spare him, and he said, he said, I can't. He said, because this whole thing is going to England. And he's like, why do you want to go to England? He had asked him this earlier. Because, you know, the people, the culture, and basically a whole nother place of victims that he can, you know, kill and maim and torment and torture and terrify, So, he said, I can't spare you because I can't risk you basically interrupting my plans. And he was like, if you let me go, I'll do anything you want. And he says, if you, so Dracula was like, okay, I want you to swear to me that if I let you go, that you won't do anything to stop me. And so he was hesitant, and then he stood up and he basically said, if you let me go, I promise that I will do everything I can in my power to stop you. And so Dracula was like, okay, that's my guy, and he broke his neck, and then he was popped on the floor. And so we're back at the Covenant, and this is when Harker realized that he was actually the undead. So now he's come to terms with the fact that he actually died on the road. He broke his neck. And so they're like, okay, so what happened after you did that? And so he wakes up on the roof, and Dracula was like, okay, so Dracula realized that he was just like him. He wasn't like the other ones who were decaying and all disgusting and gross. And so he wanted to, obviously, he was very happy and saw that Harker was different, and he wanted Harker to be his one of his brides. I thought, oh, that was interesting. Okay, yes. And so Harker, he's kind of climbed to the top of one of the to climb onto the brick, and you see this river that's going that goes by the castle, and he's ready to jump. He just wants to go, right? And so he was telling him, don't go, and I want you to stay, and we can do great things together, blah 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 blah. And Harker turns around, and then next you know, all of a sudden Dracula starts screaming, and Harker fell backwards off the castle and into the river. And so now I was like, well, wait a minute. She's trying to figure out, okay, so why did he scream? And Harker's like, I don't remember. And so the next thing you know, he starts reflecting on what happened. And he realized that when he turned around, he was still wearing the cross around his neck. And the sun was reflecting off the cross. And so that the sun was actually burning him. And so that's why Dracula was screaming, and then he fell back. And that's how some people found him, and he ended up at the convent. And then he was like, well, why did they bring me to you? And so she was like, well, they realized, they know that I kind of dabble in the occult and that, you know, that kind of stuff. And so she's like, she started to think about her religion, her belief in God, and she feels like now that, you know, all these years I've been looking for God, now I found him, and God saved you. And Harker was like, I'm nothing, and, you know, Mina, I wouldn't, you know, I can't go back to her because, you know, I just look at him, if you saw him, yeah, I think you understand why he wouldn't want to go back to her. And then there was a reveal. She's like, she wanted to hear the accounts for yourself. So this other nun, who rarely said anything, that was actually Mina. So she was there the whole time listening to his account. And she basically, and when he saw her, you could see he was just kind of like, okay. But he was shocked. Obviously he was shocked. He didn't recognize her. And she wasn't afraid of him. She basically told him that she still loved him, and that he was still her Johnny, and how she commented on his blue eyes, and how she still wanted to marry him. And the next thing you know, bats start attacking the convent and fly in, and one scratches her face, and it's a whole big thing, and she falls down. Sister Agatha said to look after Mina. She runs out to find out what's going on. Of course, all of the nuns, they go out, and they're trying to figure out where all these bats coming from. And then you know there's a wolf at the gate. And Agatha was basically saying, I know who you are. There's really no need for these pretense. And it's kind of going back and forth between the nuns at the gate and Mina and Harker in the room. And she's on the floor, so he bends down to help her, but then he sees the blood, and then you see his fangs, and now he's trying to fight. He doesn't want to keep loves Mina, so he doesn't want to kill her. And then he grabs a knife, gives it to her, and basically says, I want you just to end this. And so slashing back and forth, and Agatha's talking to Dracula at the gate and basically telling him the sun had gone down at this point, and you don't need to hide. And these bats, it's kind of noisy, so he made the bats go away, and then he changed into its human form. Of course, he's standing there stark naked in front of a convent, and all these nuns are standing around with the stakes out. He was like, oh, so you were prepared. He said, I thought you might show. She was like, I thought you might show up. And so she's like antagonizing him. Basically, like, I know that you can't come here without being invited, and nobody here is going to invite you in, so all your threats and all that means nothing. And he said, eventually, because it only takes one of you to invite me in, and I'm going to destroy your whole world. And so she's still going back and forth with him. I forget how she ends up getting cut. She's almost like she was throwing him scraps. So she kind of flicks her hand like that, like her blood kind of flex, and he bends down to get it. And he was like, what is it about you? Why are you different? And so then he realized that she's actually Agatha Van Helsing. And we flash back to the room, and so she doesn't want to kill him. She can't kill John. She still loves him. She throws a knife on the ground, and then you see like his other nature kind of taking over, and for a minute you thought he was going to kill her. He basically grabs a stake from her bosom, like it was a stake. And he realized that she wasn't going to be able to do it, and so he ends up doing it himself. He sticks himself, and as far as you know, at this point he's dead. And so she's now standing outside of the room and calling for help, and of course everybody's outside dealing with the whole situation outside. And so he finds out, her identity, and they basically, she said her piece, and they walked off, and all the nuns were back inside. And so Agatha gets to the room, and she realizes, okay, Johnny is dead. And they're talking, and she's saying that Agatha was like, we need to stop him. And of course, Mina is on board with this because, Johnny was her love, and she just doesn't want his death to be in vain. And she's like, I'm never going to love anybody again, and the whole thing. And so they go downstairs to join the other nuns, and so I'm not sure where they were, but they're downstairs, and the Mother Superior, she's giving this speech on God and where he really is, and when he really comes to us, and in our time of need. And it was a very deep story. You had a lot of the women, a lot of nuns, they were in tears. And around this time, when Dracula and Mina were talking, Sister Agatha and Mina was talking upstairs, Dracula was listening to their conversation. So when they left, he went on the scale of the building and went up to the room. And he see Johnny there lying there with his with stake in his heart. And he was like, Johnny, you can get up now. The only way the stakes in the heart work is if somebody else do it. You can't do it to yourself. And so, but he knew how to seduce Johnny into inviting him in. He basically said that if you invite me in, I'll kill you for good, like true death, I guess it would say, like if you true blood. And so it kind of